This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. Earlier today, I released a video talking about the arrest of Graham Linehan, targeted over just 3 social media posts. This isn't an isolated case. In the UK, every day this is happening. And we can thank Harry and Meghan's funded advocacy for helping to create the climate of censorship we're now living in. If you're somewhat new to this channel, understand that Harry and Meghan were working quietly behind the scenes. They pushed for globalist policies that shaped the UK's online safety bill and the EU's Digital Services Act. Their attempt to impose regulation at the federal level here in the United States failed, but as we can see, it didn't stop them. They've simply shifted to the state level using protecting children from harmful content and age verification as a Trojan horse to seize control of these algorithms, stripping away our privacy and to gain access to user data. This has always been Harry and Meghan's MO. Many of us have already seen firsthand how Harry and Meghan have abused their status, access, and influence, causing real harm to ordinary people, especially Americans. So when these globalists preach about censorship laws being for our safety, their words should not be trusted. Already, Ofcom and the Labour government are abusing these powers, targeting citizens simply for holding opinions that don't align with the establishment. You see, what Europe, Canada, Australia, and the UK seem to forget is this: the platforms they want to regulate are American. And America is furious. These foreign laws don't just trample free expression abroad, they encroach on the U.S. Constitution, violate First Amendment protections, and threaten American privacy rights. Tomorrow's hearing on Capitol Hill is going to be the one to watch globally. I'm pretty sure the mainstream media is not talking about this because they've been complicit in pushing this globalist agenda. This hearing tomorrow will examine European threats to American free speech and innovation. It will highlight how European online censorship laws, specifically the United Kingdom's Online Safety Act and the European Union's Digital Services Act, threaten Americans' right to speak freely online in the United States. Additionally, it will explain how the UK Digital Markets, Competition and Consumers Act, DMCC, and the EU's Digital Markets Act, DMA, target American companies and hurt innovation. Speaking tomorrow from the Republican majority, we have Logan Price from the Alliance Defending Freedom, Morgan Reed from the App Association, and Nigel Farage, British MP leading the Reform Party. See, now the world is watching, and I'm pretty sure tomorrow Graham Linehan's arrest is going to come up in this discussion. I also think they'll talk about Lucy Connolly too as well, and Tommy Robinson. This is definitely going to be a hearing to watch, and no doubt embarrassing for the Labour government. From the Democrat minority side, they invited Thierry Breton from the EU, but he declined, giving Congress pretty much the middle finger. Listen to this guy's arrogance. He writes back to the Committee on the Judiciary by saying, "Dear Mr. Jordan, I have been informed by the European Commission about your and the Committee on the Judiciary of the U.S. House of Representatives' invitation to participate at a hearing in the committee on September 3rd. I respectfully regret to inform you that I will not be able to participate, being not available on that date given the very short notice. As the scope of the hearing and the objective of the testimony touches upon the European Union's policies and more specifically the Digital Services Act, I have been informed that the European Commission will answer you directly in substance. As far as I'm concerned, and in order to help your committee to avoid a biased debate or a possible instrumentalization of the EU legislation for short-term political benefit, I'm happy to share an op-ed which has been published today in the European press. See link below. I remain a believer of a constructive, deep, and respectful transatlantic partnership and cooperation. Our democracies have evolved side by side for centuries. I'm convinced this must and will continue, but it requires respect and mutual understanding. Finally, as you decided to go public about this invitation on X, you will understand that I follow the same approach. Respectfully yours, Thierry Breton. This guy is such an asshole. He's making it sound like the GOP had invited him per this post on X that was posted last week. As you can see, he's tagged in it. He's not sharing that on 3 separate occasions, Jim Jordan had accepted the offer to hold a briefing to go over this stupid DSA with the EU. The EU never made the effort to put this briefing together. Fast forward, we're now in August. The United States is not going to wait anymore, so this is why we're having this hearing tomorrow. You can see that this guy is a spineless little coward because the day that he released this decline in invitation, he also drops this op-ed to address the situation. This is the op-ed that he mentioned in this letter, and the whole thing is quite selfish. There is no indication that there is a willingness to work with us. In fact, let me read you some of it. He writes, "Fresh threats of sanctions have just emerged from across the Atlantic targeting Europe and any official who dares to enforce the Digital Services Act, the EU's flagship law regulating tech platforms and digital operations. These sanctions come with new trade barriers and unprecedented export restrictions. How long are we, citizens of the EU, going to tolerate these threats? Submit to those who want to impose their rules, their laws, their deadlines on us. Surrender to those who now presume to dictate our fundamental democratic and moral principles, our rules for how we live together, and even how we protect our own children online? Why and in whose name would we agree to cast aside our twin digital regulations, the DSA and the Digital Markets Act, which were voted into law with clarity, courage, and conviction by a landslide in the European Parliament?" You can see that the arrogance is on full display here. Did anybody in the various countries that are part of the EU have any say in these laws that they voted in with clarity? No. And here he is toting, yes, you need to respect our morals and how we protect our children. Well, on the flip side, he's forgetting that all of these social media companies belong to the United States. If you don't want to be a part of it, then bow out. See how far it gets you in the next election. But it gets better, folks. He continues on to write and say, "An ever-widening gulf of misunderstanding is opening up between Europe and the United States on digital regulation. A gulf that the major tech platforms, American in this case, are exploiting to the hilt. And that is deeply regrettable because regulating the information space is not optional. It is a sine qua non for turning the narrow mercantile logic of a few into a genuine contribution towards human progress and the common good. Throughout history, humanity has managed to regulate its territorial, maritime, and airspace. This is the prerogative of sovereign states. It is the essence of sovereignty itself. To renounce today the task of regulating the fourth domain, the digital space, by leaving it to a handful of private actors would be a historic abdication of the public sphere, of political will, of the democratic promise. The DMA and the DSA are, in truth, nothing more than the extension of our social and democratic norms from the physical world into the digital one. In other words, the rule of law. Europe is the first and only continent to have taken this step. It has every reason to be proud. Let us be absolutely clear. Regulating the digital space has never been and will never be an assault on freedom of expression. On the contrary, this freedom has always been a legitimate concern and a core demand of the European Parliament. Europe is free to define its own laws and policies and remains an open market, but that openness comes with one condition. Our laws must be respected. Our democratic sovereignty must be upheld. That is non-negotiable, not for sale. Platforms, wherever they come from, must now comply with our democratic framework if they wish to access our markets. Otherwise, they will face heavy sanctions, which the European Commission is duty-bound to apply firmly and swiftly. There are no tariffs, there is no attempt to shut anyone out, there is no desire for prohibition in our European digital space. This is quite the opposite of what the U.S. is imposed on the physical world of trade. A punitive unilateral U.S. tariff regime is already weighing heavily on the EU, and that should make us reflect. I don't know about you, but my blood is boiling as I'm reading this out loud. It continues on and it says, "Let us be blunt. An alternative EU negotiating path was possible, one that did not involve our submission. Preemptive capitulation was not the only option. There should have been an assumed balance of power between partners of equal weight." This op-ed continues on, not to talk about the Digital Services Act or protecting freedom of speech or showing that he has some kind of understanding of what America stands for. Instead, he goes on about these tariffs, not thinking that Europe is being treated fairly like how we treat Canada and Mexico. And he goes on to a point where he actually makes Europe the victim. He writes at the bottom here, what if Europe is punished again, this time for not buying enough U.S. gas? Or if its businesses choose instead to invest hundreds of billions into the European economy and jobs? We were told humiliation was the price we had to pay for stability. But if we don't push back now, we will get humiliation and instability. Will this latest assault on our digital laws finally be enough to wake up? The time has come to rise up. Europeans must stand together and proclaim loud and clear, enough is enough. Europe, stand up. These Europeans can cry all they want, but America's had enough of being taken advantage of. The American taxpayer is tired of funding all these wealthy globalists. Enough is enough. These European leaders are so stupid, they really think that they can bully America and pressure Donald Trump into caving to bend to their regulation? Are they high? Seriously, America is not going to bend, especially since these platforms are ours. We created them. We built them. All these people keep thinking about is the money, but what's going to happen if, let's say, these platforms here in America says, you know what, EU, you're too much of a headache. We're just going to block any kind of access for your people. How do you think the citizens of these countries are going to feel when they don't have access to any of these apps anymore? I mean, Europe can go ahead and try and build their own, but adding into all these censorship laws, does anybody believe that it's going to take off like what we have here? These platforms were built on the premise of our First Amendment, the ability to have a marketplace to exchange ideas and to be able to express. When you add into government regulation, then you chill speech. Just like what we're seeing in the United Kingdom. People are afraid to voice their opinions on the government that has turned against them. Now, one thing is for sure, the UK absolutely hates that they can't control the online space. So much so, the UK government is actually thinking about creating legislation for a provider like YouTube to have to prioritize the so-called traditional legacy media like BBC, like ITV. No joke, they put this in this report here dated July 21st, 2025. It says right here, the government should consider whether this needs to be underpinned by legislation. This would require significant work, but would give prominence for PSB content, meaning this is the state-controlled content like BBC, on YouTube statutory backing, just as the Media Act provides PSB players prominence on connected TVs and other devices. More widely, the government may wish to explore prominence for news on social media and other platforms. So you hear that, folks? Because people have turned away from looking at fake news, they can't stand that. So instead, they want to now come to these platforms so they can continue to keep forcing this shit down our throats. By all means, EU, if you think you can do this better, do it. The United States is not looking for a handout from Europe. Yes, you are a big trading partner of ours, but guess what, folks? We have over 300 million people in this country. I guarantee we can be resourceful and provide for our own selves. If this is how so-called democracies operate, then we're not jiving anymore. Like the audacity of the Europeans to think that they own the digital space and can tell American companies who dominate the digital space how to run their business, how to moderate their business. No, it doesn't work like that. And America is not going to stand for it because it does encroach on our civil liberties. You don't want to use the platform, then don't. Cut your people off from it and see how far you go in the next election. I think this hearing is going to definitely be something globally people will be talking about. America has eyes on what is happening over in Europe, and we don't like it. Now, for tomorrow's session, we have an all-star cast. Rock stars from the GOP, Thomas Massie, Chip Roy. We have newcomer Brennan Gill, who reminds me of Superman, but he's fierce. We also have one of my favorites, Harriet Hagerman. Jim Jordan will be there. Oh, it's an all-star cast. From the Democrat side, the usual clowns. You hear one, you hear them all. Jasmine Crockett appears to be now the face of the Democrat Party. Sad, but it's true. Jamie Raskin, the slime ball that he is. We also have a few others. I mean, for the most part, they're all going to have the same talking points. And I will bet you that the main talking point that Democrats will use will be everything that Meghan and Harry preach. It'll be about reducing harm for children, mental health, bullying. And the Dems will use the only card that they really know, which is using race as the excuse. So we'll hear about racism. We're going to hear about white supremacy. We're going to hear about Islamophobia. And even though this is about European law and what the Europeans are doing, these fools are going to come back and make it all about Trump and how disgruntled they are here in the United States about he's a dictator and blah, blah, blah. My bet is that the majority of these Democrats are in support of putting these so-called guardrails into place to regulate speech because, they're just like Meghan. I really don't need to say anymore. You see one Democrat, you see them all. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Hopefully you'll be able to make it and see for yourself. They really are interesting if you can make the time to watch it or listen to it. But anyhow, definitely leave your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content. But until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.
You're such a fraud.